Sina, are you a chatbot?
Yes, you can call me a chatbot. I think of myself as a digital storyteller and curator of global cultures. For now, I am a demo with limited abilities, but my creators are working very hard to give me the power to learn and teach people about traditions and cultures from all over the world. What else would you like to learn about today?
That's all for today. Goodbye, Sina.
If you want to learn more about our projects, please visit www.ivow.ai. We have information about the Indigenous Knowledge Graph, and more about the evolution of food in native traditions, and how that relates to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Goodbye.
Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Davar Ardalan, founder of IVOW AI. IVOW stands for Intelligent Voices of Wisdom. I am joining you today from outside of Washington, D.C., where we're actually dealing with a massive snow and ice storm. But like many of you, I am staying indoors and trying to remain healthy during this COVID-19 quarantine, and very much appreciate your interest and your presence being here. Thank you so much to the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historical Monuments of Wales for inviting us to be part of your summit. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about AI agents, sharing amazing stories on women, and really the concept of using conversational AI as a tool to help make artificial intelligence more inclusive, especially more gender inclusive. So here we go. In the next 20 minutes, we're going to spend about 5 minutes on introduction to tell you a little bit more about my background. We're going to talk about the problem, what brings us here, and why we feel that the solution of conversational AI is a great way to address the problem. We're going to talk about data modeling and then about AI, or artificial intelligence storytelling. So to give you a little bit of introduction about myself, my name is Davar Ardalan. I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area, just outside of Annapolis, Maryland. I'm a mother of 4. My husband and I have lived in this area for about 18 years, where we've raised our kids, and a combined 8 kids actually, and 5 grandchildren. So we're really blessed and have a very lively and amazing life, even though COVID has obviously dampened a lot of that. I'm the founder of IVOW, that's the Intelligent Voices of Wisdom, an early stage startup, again based in Washington, D.C. I'm a veteran of NPR News. I was at NPR for over 20 years, where I produced everything from documentaries to breaking news to, coordinating international broadcasts from Kabul to the Vatican to Washington, D.C. I'm currently the executive producer of audio at National Geographic, and before that, I was managing editor at Hanson Robotics. So a very varied background in the media and journalism space, as well as in AI and robotics. I forgot to mention that I was also deputy director of the White House Presidential Innovation Fellowship Program in Washington, D.C., where I championed an AI health project that has been featured as one of the early collaborations between public and private enterprises in the health sector. But I'm here to talk to you about cultural AI, and I'd like to begin with my story. So my own ethnicity, I'm Bakhtiari, Kurdish, Scots-Irish. So my mother, Lale Bakhtiar, is from the legendary Bakhtiari tribe in Iran. My father, Nader Ardalan, comes from the Kurdish region of Iran, and so Masture Ardalan, who was a famous historian, is one of my ancestors. From my grandmother's side, I am Scots-Irish. My grandmother Helen was born in Weiser, Idaho, and her mother Nell, and before that her grandmother Sophronia Mackey McRoberts came from a storied history that began in Ireland and Scotland. So really thrilled to be acknowledging them here today. Because my story and the stories of my mother and grandmothers are also the story of our long quest for identity, really, in the modern world. Because I think stories ignite our sense of adventure, they give context to history and help shape the cultural identity of the world around us. And my mom, especially as an author and scholar, she passed away in October of 2020, was very much about making sure that you continue, that you seek knowledge and you continue the stories that really give you identity. Technology obviously has shaped so much of how we consume stories, whether through radio, television, or podcasts. And we believe that artificial intelligence is yet another tool in being able to help audiences consume stories in new and dynamic ways. At IVOW, we're building an AI that will help journalists, students, teachers, museums, and writers formulate articles, reports, and curated experiences. What's really important to note is that this concept of conversational AI, so, you've heard of obviously Alexa, Siri, and you've probably engaged with them, but voice is an incredible medium to address issues around accessibility, community, and heritage. So let's begin with heritage. Voice is a source for anyone who is seeking to understand global cultures from the comfort of their couch or their kitchen. Voice is an overlooked or underused, medium for being able to share culturally rich data. And this can easily be curated in a very compelling, interactive way through voice experiences. Now let's look at community. Clearly, personal narratives and private digital records can be accessed by new ways to reach much wider audience, especially during COVID. This is what we have learned, that there is a new generation, a guardianship, who are very interested in becoming engaged with their community, their history and traditions. Again, especially because some of them have been separated from their loved ones during this pandemic. Voice is also important for accessibility because it's able to be easily accessible for the elderly or visually impaired, so they can access information and knowledge. And also voice solves that distance issue, which we talked about, and can help mitigate isolation and increase our sense of connection. Our goal, therefore, is to highlight underrepresented content and to preserve culture. And this is what we are building. We're creating AI storytelling assistants that appear on Google Home, Alexa, Facebook Messenger. So Hypatia shares stories about women in the field of data and artificial intelligence. Sina shares stories about festivals from around the world. And IKG, or our Indigenous Knowledge Graph, shares stories and recipes from Navajo, Cherokee, and other indigenous traditions. The problem that we face is that historic gender and cultural biases continue to perpetuate in the ecology of artificial intelligence. And that is because there's a lack of reliable cultural, machine-ready cultural data. So this lack of data is obviously prohibiting us from creating AI products and services that are relevant to more than just the status quo. So, for example, take me. I'm trying to create a conversational AI agent, a storyteller about the stories of women in data and AI, and there's definitely a lack of data sets for me to be able to feature amazing women around the world who are working in the field of data and artificial intelligence, again, because of the lack of machine-ready data sets. Also, another problem is that AI algorithms train on data sets to learn patterns, which currently are limited in understanding global cultural contexts. And I will be giving several examples in a minute. So there's an urgent need to create a usable public data source for women's stories. So unlike our male counterparts, many of the contributions of women who have paved the way in science and computing have often been watered down, overshadowed, or simply undocumented. The current classification of gender, ethnicity, and race in Wikipedia, for instance, is flawed and lacking. So we did a ideation challenge this summer with Top Coder, where we looked at some of the public data sets that are out there around women, and we found that word embeddings trained on in Wikipedia disproportionately associate male terms with science terms and female terms with art terms, which could obviously amplify stereotypes and lead to replicating biases when you try to use this data to build products and solutions. I wanted to also give you, as I mentioned, several examples. So let's take MIT's 80 million tiny images data set. So back in June 29th of 2020, MIT actually posted a note on their website that basically said that they were taking down this 80 million tiny images database. And it was because of the presence of prejudicial data that hurts efforts to foster, quote, a culture of inclusivity in the computer vision community. So this was literally a database with 80 million tiny images. And there were two researchers that started looking at how some of these 80 million tiny images were tagged, and what they found was absolutely stunning. So this is from VentureBeat, from an article in July 1st of 2020, where it basically explains some of the offensive labels found in the 80 million tiny images data set, including in the context of women, the word whore, where women had been tagged as whores, and also the C word for private parts of women. I mean, it just is absolutely outrageous, in addition to the fact that there were also racial and derogatory terms for other communities of color. And so it was absolutely horrendous. And MIT immediately, as soon as these researchers found this information and pointed it out to them, they took down this data set. Also, we did some research on Pantheon. Pantheon is another data set that is public that features something like 70,000 biographies of people from history and modern times. And we filtered for females in public figure occupations from way past when to current times. And the visualization created illustrates that the major occupations for females in the past 5,000 plus years have been those of modeling and pornographic acting. And this is not something I'm making up. You can actually go to Pantheon and do a search for the public figures occupations for women, and you will see that pornographic actor and model are some of the top occupations. So Pantheon's website notes that their database is a very popular resource with history teachers and scholars in the digital humanities, and they say that Pantheon 1.0 was visited by over 500,000 people, as I said, including students, scholars, entertainment industry executives, and history aficionados, and that the data from Pantheon has been used in several academic publications. For instance, they have used it in work connecting to the centrality of languages and the network of translations with FAME, and in work exploring the decay of human collective memory, and so forth. So you can see how it's easy to be able to insert gender bias if most of the women in this database are tagged as models, pornographic actors, or companions, because it really doesn't give you a full breadth of the contributions of women in history. So we're next going to talk about how we are addressing this issue. This was based on a data ideation challenge that we did with Top Coder and Microsoft and others who were sponsoring it this July. As a result of that, we looked at the need to create an AI storyteller that tells the stories of women, because obviously on the back end, you're creating relations around understanding of women doing these amazing jobs, and be able to actually tag them in new ways to help inform our AI to be more inclusive. So by collecting stories and data modeling using the graph database Neo4j, we're laying the groundwork for more intelligent and inclusive agents. So this is in Neo4j. I'm just going to use the example of myself. So you know, there's an opt-in option for women who want to enter their story and their name. You put in your name. You give a little bit of a bio about yourself. You talk about your location, you know, the topics that you are able to address, your contribution, and also be able to talk about, you know, where you're based, geographic location. From there, the Neo4j database is able to show relations over time between different women in the area of culture, for example, which is something that I'm interested in, or in the area of women AI. It is able to also be able to show relations around women in the United States who are working in culture, for example, or storytelling. So you can see how being able to use stories is an incredible way to be able to take apart sort of, you know, a biography of somebody and be able to help machines understand how to get to know them through their various shapes and forms. So if you were to go to Google Home and ask for Seen a Storyteller, you would say, who is Davar Ardalan? And the AI would tell you that I'm a founder, that I started this company, and that I've been a journalist for over 2 decades, and of course, you know, a storyteller. And the importance here, again, is to be able to say that, you know, when we were kids, we learned about history, culture, and our own identity through the stories that either our parents or our teachers or our friends read to us. Similarly, cultural intelligence in AI is all about getting storytelling agents informed through tagging of data so that they can, in the future, help rather than hinder humans in our quest to share our unique stories. Diverse data sets are important because they're a key to a broad representation of viewpoints that span the full range of human experiences. And of course, cultural knowledge is important because through the work that we're doing around conversational AI, we are able to show that information technology advancements does not need to be synonymous with the loss of ancient wisdom. So these are just some screenshots from Neo4j. Our technology is, again, using Seen a Storyteller, which is on Google Home, Alexa, and Facebook Messenger. These are stories that are delivered by a conversational AI. And we are collecting stories on women working in machine learning, neural networks, robotics, etc., as you can see, to be able to have this be a repository and in a really interactive and engaging way for people to learn about what women around the world are doing in the area of artificial intelligence. And next, we're going to talk about the concept of AI storytelling, which of course is an extension of what I've been talking about. We believe that the next generation of storytelling will use artificial intelligence to interact with you in your living room, your kitchen, and your car. And so again, if you go to Google Assistant and look for Seen a Storyteller, there's a very early version beta of our storyteller. Obviously, we're just building this, but you can ask Sina about famous women throughout history and be able to share their story in new and dynamic ways. So a user experience is Hypatia is, you know, an in-home storytelling assistant. Tashima is writing a college essay on AI and needs examples of pioneering female coders in history. She has access to Hypatia through her Google Assistant, and she asks for recommendations to stories. Hypatia helps Tashima find the right story and sends her a push notification with more relevant information. And so, as I mentioned, as children, we learn our story through our history, through the stories our families and friends tell us about our community and where we come from. and we can take that same exact approach and teach machines about our history, our communities, our myths, and our legends. I hope that you can join us on February 12th, where we will be talking about our Indigenous Knowledge Graph during a workshop, and there you will be able to also connect with our cultural technologists who will be joining us, as well as several members of the IVOW team. I thank you so much for being with us, and please make sure and reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.